I'm a Melbourne blogger and I write a lot of politics and lifestyle, and Julia Gillard has meant a lot to women in my age bracket. And even though it's been hard watching what we perhaps hoped she'd represent initially kind of falter, seeing her here tonight gives me a great sense of hope for the future.
I wanted to see for myself that she'd recovered from that terrible ordeal that she was put through during her time in office.
I have been a fan of Julia for ever since she became Prime Minister, and I think she's just a fantastic woman, and I was just interested to hear her story, really.
What an opportunity to listen to Julia speak, so have everything coming from her mouth and not being at all adulterated by the media.
Having her come back for this talk has just been absolutely exciting.
Well, I've always been a fan of Julia Gillard's. In fact, I was a colleague of hers very early on in the law and always had time for Julia. We didn't work at the same firm. In fact, we were competitors. So I had a very personal interest. I've always followed her career with interest. But the importance of the office that she held was something very dear to me. I was a bit unhappy with the way that she was treated in public life. I thought the misogyny was extraordinary, and I thought the way that she met it with her grace and refusal to be too affected by it or too drawn into it was just extraordinary. And I thought she'd be very engaging.
I think Julia Gillard is one of the most important people of our lifetime, and it was important for me to come to be here, to listen to her, to pay a tribute to her for what she has done for this country.
And I just like the idea of the community engagement, the community having real access to a person who's held such a high office in the nation's democracy and on the world stage. I think that's fabulous.
I'm a real believer in the importance of paying tribute to people who make a huge mark on the way we live as a community, and particularly women who have such a hard time making that mark. And I think that Julia Gillard made a huge mark, a huge impact on the way young women in particular and women of my generation can see that there was a real possibility that we could actually participate in government and in social change.
I watch her misogyny speech weekly. There's just something about her that, like, when she left Parliament, not so much left Parliament, when she left leadership, it was just such a shock.
What happened to her in terms of the way she was knocked off in June of this year meant to me that we needed to find a way as a community to come together and pay tribute to that mark and that contribution.
Well, I've always admired Julia and her strength. I just find she's inspirational for us women.
Julia Gillard, also the gender lens of Ann Summers' work. Julia is a competent, effective leader, and I was looking forward to a tough, inspiring conversation between two very bright people.
I also have a great deal of time for Ann Summers. I think that she's been not a solo voice, but a really important voice in the events of the recent month. She, you know, her mantra about wanting to publish stuff that's sane and relevant so rings bells with me.
I am a member of the Labor Party, and I was inspired by certain leaders in the past, but never as inspired as I have been by Julia Gillard.
The surprises were the humour, the candour, the insight into the life of a leader.
I was surprised at her clear lack of bitterness over what has happened to her, and her optimism for the future and her optimism for women in public life.
I guess the biggest thing for me is how calmly she can talk about things and how she just seems to have let it go and not had the bitterness. I think that's pretty impressive, and I think it's still quite relatively not that long ago that it all happened, and to see that she's able to let it go, because I know mentally that that's a really good way to be. I just don't really know how you actually do that, so I think that was awe-inspiring.
Some of the insights about what it takes to be an effective politician, I think, the kind of partnering to get issues, policy issues across the line, the complexity of looking at what it means to be a dynamic nation in the 21st century. Some of that stuff that you just don't get through kind of moderated TV reports.
That she did have fun while she was leader. I think that was a bit of a surprise. From an outside point of view, it seemed like she, occasionally wasn't having fun.
I was pleasantly surprised at how positive she was about the whole thing and how well she seemed to have come through it all.
One was seeing the 11-year-old girl ask a really great question, and a little bugbear of mine. A couple of people I thought asked great questions about respect and manners in public life. So no absolute surprises, but a few really good laughs and some terrific questions from unexpected sources.
Saying how she copes with all the shit she copped, is that right? And how she handled it. It's just admirable, and there doesn't seem to be any anger.
No surprises. I mean, really the same questions, the same social issues that she dealt with over the course of her time as Prime Minister were really raised in this environment. I think she dealt with them all pretty well, probably more openly than she was able to deal with some of them in government. I particularly found her response to the gay marriage stuff, where I've never had any sympathy for her position. I think her position about the state's involvement in people's personal relationships, I think, has some merit. And to hear her say that was the real reason is the first real time that I've heard her speak from that position. So in that respect, that I suppose was a surprise, and it was sort of a source of relief in some respects.
I thought that her rebuttal to gay marriage in general is so far left. It's so, in a way, Marxist, in that there should be no marriage at all for anybody. That's the inference. It's really powerful. Is it relevant to our community? Probably not, but that's her personal view, so that's okay.
I have a gay son, and with a partner of 12 years, and they very much want to get married. So I was interested in her response to that last night, and again she reiterated it a bit tonight, because that was the one point I thought, that I thought she would have been, totally in agreement with. But hearing her explanation last night, I think I sort of understood where she was coming from, but I know she's supportive of a conscience vote, so we hope we'll get it through eventually.
She's just an inspirational lady. That's my whole impression.
We need strong moral and political conversations and more of them in this country, and tonight was a taster, so that was terrific.